Hey strangers, there's one thing we know for sure as business owners ourselves. The less your business spends, the more margin you keep. But today, everything costs more. So, smart businesses are graduating to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one proven platform, helping you reduce IT costs, maintenance costs, and manual errors. Over 37,000 companies have already made the move to NetSuite. Backed by popular demand, NetSuite has extended its one-of-a-kind flexible financing program for a few more weeks. Head to netsuite.com/strange. netsuite.com/strange.
Hey, true crime fans! Tired of ads interrupting your gripping investigations? Good news. With Amazon Music, you have access to the largest catalog of ad-free top podcasts included with your Prime membership. After all, ads shouldn't be the scariest thing about true crime. To start listening, download the Amazon Music app for free or go to amazon.com/ad-free-true-crime. That's amazon.com/ad-free-true-crime to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads.
I'm Laurah Norton, and this is One Strange Thing, the show where we search the nation's news archives for stories that can't quite be explained. Strangers, we must admit, we love a good curse. Not being cursed, because obviously we don't have time for that, and neither does anyone else. But tales of curses, they hit a soft spot for us. Maybe it's because, by their nature, they afflict the unwilling participant. People who are often non-believers, and who would just like to be left alone, please. Honestly, it's a fascinating concept. Then there are the lengths that people go in order to banish a curse, and that the consequences of not doing so can be dire. The genre is a big, delicious can of dramatic worms, with enough variation to keep things truly interesting. It's no wonder that we've covered all manner of cursed objects, from dolls to cabinets. But today's curse, and yes, we have a curse for you today in case that wasn't obvious, is a little more nebulous. Not in its impact exactly. The people who've been affected by this curse would certainly say that it is very, very clear. It's because we're not discussing a concrete object, but rather cursed music. And it's not even one song in particular. We could continue dropping breadcrumbs about what we mean, or we could just tell the story. So, let's start with David Maslanka. He's likely not a composer you'd know off the top of your head. Not unless you've spent time in a band or orchestra that plays contemporary work. The famous Maslanka pieces often have solo parts for many different instruments. And that, according to the sheet music publisher Carl Fischer, makes these pieces especially popular with school bands. David Maslanka was a Polish-American composer who worked in the music space for many decades. Per his website, his musical career began in earnest in 1968. And lasted until he passed away in 2017. When David Maslanka died, he left behind a finished symphony, his 9th, and some bits and pieces of what was to become his 10th. According to New Music USA, his plan had been to dedicate his 10th symphony for his wife, Allison, and it was partially written when he passed away. He'd left behind, quote, clear notes for the anticipated completion of his 10th symphony. But it wasn't complete, nor was it polished. We imagine, as people who know very little about this field, that writing a symphony fit to perform takes some time and some tinkering. Now, of course, it's impressive to write one symphony in a lifetime, let alone 9.5. And artists often leave behind partially finished work. That's the nature of creation and of life. This is hardly a unique circumstance, in the sense that people die sometimes, right? Well, it might not be unusual, except for one strange thing. Since the 1800s, there have been rumors that a curse has been responsible for the deaths of many composers, including David Maslanka. More specifically, a curse that actually targets those who have the audacity to compose more than 9 symphonies. In classical music circles, it's referred to as the Curse of the Ninth. According to the Baltimore Sun, the curse came about not because of any particular tragedy, but because of a monumental success, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. The behemoth of a piece was first performed in 1824. Even if the name doesn't bring a melody to mind, you definitely know this one. We promise. That was Ode to Joy, the final movement of the Ninth Symphony. We told you that you'd know it. Beethoven's Ninth is a very famous piece now, to be sure. But per the Central New Jersey Home News, it's also a very important one. Quote, Beethoven's Ninth is probably the most important symphony in the literature, especially in terms of its influence over subsequent generations. By its quasi-mystical brand of humanism, by its instrumentation and structure, even by its role as Beethoven's final symphony. You have to understand, strangers. Beethoven was functionally equivalent to a rock star in his time. So when he dropped a banger like the Ode to Joy, it quickly became the symphony to end all symphonies. Perhaps literally. Part of that is because Ode to Joy was simply that good. Instantly iconic, one might say. It's also because Beethoven died right before he could finish his 10th one. Per the Sun, quote, according to this dark theory, the foolhardy composer who dared to try to match or outdo Beethoven in quantity of symphonic output would pay for such effrontery with a shortened lifespan. Now, strangers, if this is true, the curse of not being able to dunk on Beethoven took effect remarkably quickly. The Sun wrote that Franz Schubert wrote his Ninth Symphony in 1828 and promptly died in November of that year, at only 31 years old, and due to an uncertain illness. Per the Sun, the curse's next victim was Louis Spohr, a German composer who passed away in 1857, 2 years after beginning work on his 10th symphony. Though, as the Sun also notes, if anyone was asking to be smited, it was probably this guy. Quote, maybe he brought that fate on himself by dissing Beethoven's Ninth, declaring that the finale was so ugly, so tasteless, and so cheap that I cannot understand how such a genius as Beethoven could have composed it. And the Austrian composer, Anton Bruckner, was attempting to complete the 4th and final movement of, you guessed it, his Ninth Symphony in 1894, when his health failed. He wrote in his papers, quote, that, my only wish is to be allowed to finish my Ninth Symphony. There remains only the finale. I trust death will not deprive me of my pen. But, strangers, it did. Bruckner's Ninth remained unfinished, and according to the Cincinnati Post, he left behind a little bit of a mess. Quote, at his death on October 11, 1896, the collaborators were faced with a score that was both colossal and incomplete, and of a boldness uncompromising by even Bruckner's standards. At the turn of the 20th century, Gustav Mahler, too, passed away, as he attempted to craft a 10th symphony. Per the Sun, he was a superstitious man, and might have actually been the person who made the curse public knowledge. As his widow Alma once wrote, quote, it was a superstition of Mahler's that no great writer of symphonies got beyond his ninth. So, believing that, Mahler tried to cheat the system. After his 8th symphony, he wrote what was technically his ninth, but he didn't number it officially. He decided that for that reason, he was safe. We have some questions about this, strangers. Can curses read? Do they care about titles in a situation like this? If you believed in a curse, why would you assume that writing a 9th symphony, but not calling it that, would be your saving grace? In any case, it wasn't for Mahler. He died in 1911 before finishing what was technically, in sequential order, his 10th symphony. And because Mahler had told his friends and loved ones about this curse that he wanted so badly to avoid, when he died, understandably, those friends and family were a little more willing to lend the curse idea some credence. According to the Home News, Arnold Schoenberg, a student of Mahler's, remarked in a speech in 1912, "It seems that the 9th is the limit. He who wants to go beyond it must pass away. It seems as if something might be imparted to us in the 10th that we ought not yet to know, something for which we are not ready. Those who have written a 9th stood too close to the hereafter." And it does seem that there are many, many more examples of people who stood a little too close to the hereafter. There's Ralph Vaughan Williams, the American composer, who died weeks after his 9th symphony premiered in 1958. Per WQXR, his death was sudden, and his family was shocked. This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Whether you love true crime or comedy, celebrity interviews or news, you call the shots on what's in your podcast queue. And guess what? Now you can call them on your auto insurance too with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive. It works just the way it sounds. You tell Progressive how much you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll show you coverage options that fit your budget. Get your quote today at Progressive.com to join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
علي الحماس مع منيو بيتزا هات ماي بوكس الجديد. 4 خيارات ماي بوكس تعدلها على كيفك وزيد عليها اختيارات ما لها حدود. اطلب ماي بوكس اليوم وخليها على ذوقك. بيتزا أو ملت كله بكيفك، وطلباتك الجانبية اختر 2 أو مشروب، خياراتك ما تنتهي. هي شروطك وأحكامك اللي ترضي ذوقك. منيو بيتزا هات ماي بوكس الجديد بشروطك وأحكامك. بيتزا هات اطلب اليوم.
Now, there are those who appear to have escaped this curse. Shostakovich got to 15 symphonies. The Sun also cites the American composers Roy Harris and Alan Hovhannes. And there's the Finnish composer Leif Segerstam, who has an excellent artsy Santa Claus aesthetic going. But more importantly, Music Finland reports that he's written more than 350 symphonies to date. He'll turn 80 years old this March. And here's one that you might actually recognize if you spent time in high school orchestra: Antonin Dvorak. The Czech composer was able to write his 9th symphony without incident. It premiered in 1893, and Dvorak lived for almost a decade after the fact. The Sun proposes that he survived the curse of the 9th because, well, he never attempted to write a 10th. It's unclear whether there might have been similar technicalities that could have saved the likes of Shostakovich and Harris. And then there's the curious case of Philip Glass. We started this story with an American composer, so it's only fitting that we end with one too. The good news is, Philip Glass, he's alive. He's also prolific. Per his Merriam-Webster Encyclopedia entry, he's written 15 operas, 12 concertos, 3 Oscar-nominated film scores, and 14 symphonies. But despite putting up such impressive numbers, Philip Glass also seems to be a believer in the curse of the 9th. Or at least he was the last time anyone asked him about it. And that would have been, you guessed it, around the time his 9th symphony premiered, back in 2012. According to The Guardian, the premiere at Carnegie Hall was mostly without incident, save for a member of the audience collapsing because of a medical issue. They turned out to be fine. But Philip Glass had approached the project of a 9th symphony with some trepidation. And in talking about it publicly, he shed light on something interesting. A lot of modern composers are, in fact, a little bit afraid to write their 9th symphonies. As he told The Guardian, everyone is afraid to do a 9th. It is a jinx that people think about. What kind of silly jinx is that? I wasn't going to wait to find out. See, Philip Glass, he'd taken some precautions before premiering his Ninth Symphony. In 2007, he told the Baltimore Sun that just as he got commissioned to write number 9, that he had a plan. Maybe I'll just compose the 10th first. And, in speaking to The Guardian years later, when his Ninth Symphony premiered, it seemed that the composer had stayed true to that promise. Namely, he had, in fact, already written the 10th one before the premiere of his 9th, just in case. And that, strangers, is the beauty of a curse. Of course, we are very happy that Philip Glass managed to evade whatever forces might have come for him after his 9th Symphony. And if indeed a curse is the reason that so many composers have perished before their 10th Symphony, that truly is a shame and a great loss. But if you're not inclined to believe in a centuries-old, wide-reaching curse impacting only classical music composers, and we suspect that most of the world falls into that camp, then you might find that there's a certain charm to 21st century composers still observing these superstitions. And it's not as though this belief now led to an overwhelming fear as much as it used to. We've listed many composers who've crested 9 symphonies and come out unscathed. And much like referring to, the Scottish play when one is near a stage production, the classical community does seem to have its fun with the curse of the 9th. The Times columnist wrote in 2011 that an orchestra in British Columbia was organizing all of its programming for the season around 9th symphonies and honoring the composers whose departures they might have hastened. Per the Home News, the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra did the same thing back in 2012. The Asbury Park Press reported that the Plainfield Symphony Orchestra did something similar in 2015. Similar concerts and series, they've popped up reliably in the years since. After all, humans do love to come up with a rule and then imagine the consequences for breaking it. One might choose to believe in a curse or act as though one does, just in case. But the result, it's the same. We craft a story, we live by it, and then we pass it along through the generations until it's less a story and more a fact of life. And that is why we love a good curse. You have to admit, it's a bonding experience. Again, though, if you are in a position to curse us, please don't. We are very, very busy. We hope you'll join us next time for another real-life story from the fine print of America's local papers. From the lives of regular people, just like you and me, except for one strange thing. Strangers, I've released my first book, and it's available everywhere now as audiobook, hardcover, and ebook. I read the audio version myself. It's called Lay Them to Rest, and it's about John and Jane Doe's, my years-long experience following forensic experts around the country, and our efforts to solve the mystery of a cold case. One Strange Thing is an independently produced podcast. To support the show and to hear more of the entirely true and enticingly peculiar, you now have 3 options to hear 2 extra bonus episodes a month. On Apple Premium and Supercast, you can get the bonus episodes delivered to your app of choice for just $2.99. And for $2 more a month on Patreon, you'll get more fun extras. There you'll find ad-free early releases of our regular episodes, 2 full-length bonus episodes, monthly giveaways, blog posts, and occasional live streams, all for $5 a month. We hope you'll check out one of these options and support the show. There's a link in our show notes. And if you enjoy One Strange Thing, please take a moment to leave us a great rating or review on your favorite podcast app. It really helps.